Harold Wilson from Midlan, Texas. Let's give Harold a nice hand.
Is there anybody here that had anything to do with this that hadn't been introduced? I've got a couple of fellows I want to introduce. Eddie R. and Jack T. They carried my bag from the car up into the hotel. My name is Harold Wilson, and I am an alcoholic. Hi. And I never stand at one of these things that the same feeling comes over me. My legs get to shaking, and my stomach's uneasy, and my hands sweating. My dentures get loose. And I need to go to the bathroom so bad I'm about... I don't believe there were this many people at a meeting of my creditors when I first sobered up. I love to talk about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And every now and then I just have to talk about this program. And most of the time I don't spend a great deal of time talking about the tragedy in the jails and the unkind judges, the non-understanding, non-alcoholic, non-Al-Anon wife that most of us had before we got here. Because my story is like yours. Everything happened to me that happens to one who cannot drink and doesn't know it. And most of the time I spend talking about something that's beginning to catch on. I've heard it mentioned a couple of times here. And it's sort of in spite of a lot of things that are going on in our fellowship today, this thing is beginning to kind of catch on. It's called the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. From time to time, people are opening it. And they're finding out that what they thought was true is not true at all. And they're finding out that AA has always been, and I pray to God always will be, one drunk talking to another. And this is the thing that I like to talk about. I like to talk about our book and what I found in it. I came to this program, or as I told some of you, this is not quite true, as most of us' stories after we've been sober quite a while are not quite true. The best part of mine, I'm sure my wife could tell. I don't remember. And from time to time across this country, I hear one a little better than mine, and if I'm away from home, I use it. I heard a little of my stuff out here today. But I do like to talk about how I came to this program. I was brung, really. My wife and the fellow who later resigned as my sponsor became willing to go to any length to get me sober, and so they brung me. And I liked what I saw, and I liked what I heard. And I liked some of the things that were going on that were a little like where I'd just been. quite a bit of hugging and kissing. And I'd see 2 or 3 old boys shake hands with each other in every room of the club, and I wondered what was going on there. You know, you'd go on Monday and you didn't go back till Tuesday. Same deal went on. But I enjoyed it. I liked it, and I understood that these people had a problem, and 1 or 2 of them had some problems that needed tending to. But I couldn't get the hang of that not drinking. I just couldn't catch on to that. I became very spiritual, and was able with some success to exercise a little profundity, and we've got a lot of that in AA today. People get so profound they get drunk. But I kept coming back when I could. And I'd stay sober 30 days, and then I'd take sick. And as soon as I'd get able, we'd go back to this, what do they call it, wonderful, wonderful way of life. Damn near dead, you know. I heard old Bailey describe something one time. He's over in Texas lying, and he was talking about convulsions. Well, I was pretty new at the time I heard him. This set me back a while, and he described this thing he called fits. And this is what I'd have when I'd go on a drunk. I don't know anything about coming to an AA meeting and say, oh, I got drunk last night. I'm so sorry I broke my dry date. When I'd get back, it'd be a couple of weeks between meetings. But people were good to me and kind to me, and I didn't hear a great many things that I hear today. You know, we practice this program so well today. When an old boy gets drunk, we immediately say, I wonder what's wrong with him. If he gets drunk 3 or 4 times, we gather over in the corner around the psychiatrist's couch or the marital counseling corner, financial advisory committee, and we say, you know, there's something else wrong with him. But I didn't hear that then. This has come along with me. By the way, I haven't had a drink since April 27th of 1960. And for this, I'm very grateful. But prior to this time, I was having a little trouble coming into this program. No more trouble than I'd had before I got to this program. As long as I was a social drinker, I was just drunk as hell. But after I got to be an alcoholic, I'm going to tell you something. I had some trouble. That's after I came to AA. I became an alcoholic. I was about the same type of social drinker as an old boy that lives down in Houston says he was. Somebody in the bar would say, I believe I'll have a drink. And he'd say, so shall I. And that was about the type of social drinker that I was. But I always wanted to be sober. I'm sure. I always wanted to. This is kind of like the old joke you tell at home, and I'm sure you've heard it, about the cowboys out in front of the joint, pretty well hopped up and had their pistols with them, and they were shooting around, and an old farmer rode up on a mule. And one of the cowboys pulled out his gun and said to this farmer, "Do you know how to dance?" And he started shooting at his feet. And the old farmer counted them, and when he got to 6, he reached up across the back of that old mule and pulled a rifle out and cocked it. He said, "Cowboy, have you ever kissed a mule?" He said, "No, but I've always wanted to." And this is kind of the way I was. I always wanted to, you know. In April of 1960, I became convinced there was nothing in this program for me. And somehow or another, I got a case of whiskey. Not somehow or another, I wrote another hot check. A drunk don't do nothing somehow or another. And I went to a motel in my hometown, not too far from where I lived, 2 or 3 miles, and I went in and I locked the door. And I started to empty bottles. And one morning I had been there some 13 or 14 days, and nobody had been in and nobody had been out. I don't know anybody that had wanted in, to tell you the truth. I had a little boy at that time, was about 12 years old, and I could remember he'd call from time to time to see if I was all right. But I woke up this morning, and I didn't know it was morning, to tell you the truth, and I looked at my watch, and it was 3 o'clock. I didn't know whether it was 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, but I had left the television set on. And there was a lot of noise and some white stuff, but no picture. And I got up to do the only thing that I knew to do to relieve the pain we've been talking about here. Take another drink. And I went into the bathroom to get me a little branch water to chase that booze with. And as I bent over the lavatory, I looked into the mirror. And I've been trying for several years now to describe what I saw. And I'm not able to do it. But for what seemed like an hour and was only a moment or two, I saw the results of my life and how I had lived it and on what basis that I had lived it on, and that it was all over. I couldn't even drink myself to death. And I simply, as I looked in the mirror, I simply said, "God help me." I have not had a drink since that moment. I'd like to tell you that I spoke at the Sunday evening meeting the next day, but that's not true. I went home, and for about 10 days, the visitors came and went, and some stayed. Only I was the only one visiting with them. And when the fits and the tongue chewing and the sweating and the... Chuck said this word today, and I can say it. I can say it better than he can say it. Puking. When the puking. And I was the pukee in this case. When this was over, I went back to AA, and I didn't go back this time for the socializing. I didn't go back down to see if they might elect me secretary at the coming election or let me serve on the committee or pass out the bingo cards or something. I went back to see if I could find somebody that knew something about not drinking. That's what I want to find out. I knew about this wonderful, wonderful way of life. And I knew about some people that had been drunks like I was a drunk that were not drinking. And I wanted to find out about it. And a guy handed me a book. And he said, read it. And as you read it, whether you understand it or not, whether you believe it or not, do it. Just do it. And every time you almost reach the point that you can't make it, just follow the damned instructions. No need to go anywhere else. Just follow the instructions. And so I opened this book. And in it I found some things that down through the years, from time to time, I am able to do better, and sometimes not at all. But I found some things in here that told me about me, that let me live a little easier with you and with my family and the people about me. And I love the steps of this program and the traditions of this program and all of the answers we're getting today in our pamphlets. You got a problem, right in New York, send you a pamphlet. But I found in this book about Alcoholics Anonymous. The foreword of the book said to me that we in Alcoholics Anonymous are many thousands of men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And that was me. That was me. And to show other alcoholics precisely how we recovered. Precisely. We almost held a study group on that word one time. We were having some trouble with the interpretation of it. Precisely how we recovered is what this book is all about. Then I began to read the doctor's opinion. This little guy who I think, and I never knew him and many of you did, but who I think as a professional man did more for this society than anyone before or after. A little guy who in his lifetime treated some 40,000 alcoholics and who gave us the answer that the illness was twofold in nature. Twofold in nature. He observed the phenomenon of craving in the alcoholic, peculiar only to this class of drinker, and that was me. He said to us in nearly every case, talking about the alcoholic, in nearly every case their ideals must be well grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. And mine had to be recreated. He talked to us about the phenomena of craving and that this psychic change must occur or there was no hope for us. He talked about the disease of the mind and the body. I could understand in my life the joy in my drinking, happiness, and then the same amount of drinking in my despair and in my sorrow, and I didn't know why. And he explained this to me. And he said that even though we were people defective, people anxious and apprehensive, this was not the whole story. That we had a physical allergy to alcohol. And I understood this. I understood for the first time in my 41-year childhood what was wrong with me and why I couldn't drink. I knew that I lied and I cheated and I stole. I knew this. But this was mental. Why was it when I took one drink, I was compelled to continue to drink through this insatiable craving until I was down and babbling like an idiot? I didn't understand this. But he told me in this text. Then I read Bill's story. And in it he says a great many things that often are misquoted across our fellowship. But he does say some things in here that were very important to me. And he said to me, and maybe not to you, this is as I read it and see it, he said, after talking to his friend, who told him that he had religion, who told him that a couple of guys came to the court and persuaded the judge to let him go with them. He told him, after he had talked with this friend, he said to us in Alcoholics Anonymous, it was only a matter of me being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing else was required for me to make my beginning. And I understood this because all my life, when things got better, I was going to change. When things got worse, I was going to change. Tomorrow I would do better. But now, he said to me, it was only a matter of me being willing to believe that I had never done this. And I tried it. And then I read what he did in the hospital, not at the first AA meeting, but he and his friend made a list of all the people he resented and that he had harmed in the hospital. And he became willing to right the wrongs, to not criticize or condemn. And he offered himself prior to this great spiritual experience we hear about. Prior to this, he did these things. And I'm so glad he explained this to me. I'd have been running around in AA till yet, waiting for the lightning or the thunder or the bolt to strike me for my spiritual experience. But he did some things before this happened to him. And I began to do these things. And I read in the solution that these people who had gotten sober, who suffered as I had suffered, who had the same illness, they believed that the main problem of the alcoholic centered in his mind rather than in his body. And they offered us this solution in italics in our big book. When it said, almost none of us liked the self-searching, the leveling of the pride, the confession of our shortcomings, that the successful consummation of this program requires. Almost none of us. I haven't run across anybody yet in this program that has dashed up to me and very enthusiastically exclaimed, I'm so overjoyed over my self-searching. But the book says almost none of us, and I like that because I sure didn't like what I was having to do. And this was the solution it gave me. This, I believe, were the principles. We kick around a lot of adjectives now in AA that describe something we do, but this is the solution, it says. The self-searching, the leveling of the pride, the confession of our shortcomings. This, I believe, for me, daily is the solution to my problem. As I look into more about alcoholism, as I wanted to see the nature of the illness that I suffered from, as I saw in this chapter that I must concede to my innermost self that I was alcoholic, that this was the first step in my recovery. To myself, the concession, I was alcoholic, powerless. I could not drink. The first step in my recovery. And the great warning, as I take it, at the end of this chapter, so important that it says to us, once again, the alcoholic at certain times, has no effective mental defense against taking the first drink. Except in rare cases, neither he nor any other human power can do anything about this. His help must come from a power greater than ourselves. Let's think about once again, at certain times, you and I will have no effective mental defense against taking the first drink. Our help must come from a power greater than ourselves. All across our fellowship, from time to time, we hear the sad story of a man sober 5 and 10 and 15, and very recently in our country, in Texas, right close to us, 22 years, drunk. Once again, at certain times, you and I who are alcoholics have no effective mental defense against taking the first drink. Our help must come from a power greater than ourselves. The 4th chapter of our book talked to me about what I was, what kind of people suffer from this illness. We agnostics. I hear all kinds of descriptions of alcoholics. I hear people say he has alcoholic tendencies. And I look and there ain't nothing showing. I want a new pamphlet that says, this is the way he looks when he's ready. Or send me the other pamphlet. This is the way he looks when he ain't ready. But in this chapter, God knows, folks, here is the alcoholic. If when you honestly want to, you cannot quit drinking entirely, or if when drinking you cannot control the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you are suffering from an illness that only a spiritual experience can conquer How about that? A lot of folks just went out of business. Only a spiritual experience can conquer, not my words, good people who found the thing that allows us to have the beautiful banquet in Roundup in Palm Springs this weekend. Sobriety. This is the alcoholic. We agnostics. You don't need to go anywhere other than in the shelter of your own meeting room, sitting next to another drunk, listening to the story of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is sobriety, I believe. This I deeply believe. There are great many things that contribute to our fellowship, but they don't work if you drink. All of these things are great. The Serenity Prayer is wonderful. The traditions are outstanding. Mass in the morning will thrill you to death if you don't drink. And here we're talking about the thing I could not do was not drink. As my children say, I knew all that stuff. I knew I wasn't supposed to drink and wet in the clothes closet and puke on the bridge table and climb out the back window in the dead of winter and wonder what the hell I was doing locked out. I knew all that stuff. But I couldn't not drink. I couldn't not drink. And here in this chapter, told me about what kind of fellow I was. Isn't it nice when the book says to you, we were people having trouble with personal relationships? Ain't that a laugh? The people that were chasing the nuts out of the insane asylum would cross the street scared they was going to catch me. I had trouble with it, not only personal, dogs didn't like me. But this is what our book says, and then the beautiful chapter you heard read in part here tonight, how it works. It works. How it works. The first 4 steps of this program. And it said in here to me the thing you heard read tonight. No human power could relieve my alcoholism. I began to believe this. And this chapter took me to the 3rd step of this program, not once but twice. In the book we're taken to the 3rd step of this program twice. Why? Because a line says, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out physically and mentally. When the spiritual malady is overcome. Oh, I hear a great deal of talk today. We've got rehab programs and vocational programs and educational programs, and we got a few people getting sober in AA. And they physically make that drunk where he can jump 10 feet high. He looks better, he feels better, he smells better, and he can stay drunk longer. In our state hospitals in the state of Texas, and I thank God for them, but go sometimes to the alcoholic ward and say, is this your first trip? Oh, no, I was here when they first opened it. It's been open 14 or 15 years. Let's stay with our program. How do you help a drunk? Tell him about yourself. Tell him about yourself. How bad did you hurt? How lonesome were you? How totally apart from the ones you love. Because you love. Tell him about yourself. Our book tells us this. And as we read in the 6th chapter of our book, it covers from our 5th to our 11th step, we see some great lines as it explains what we're to do, exactly how we're to do it. Exactly how we're to do it. But it says a great thing there to me. What we have here is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. Not how well I feel. Not what my blood pressure is or how much weight have I lost or have I picked up all in check. Contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. My gut level understanding of who gave me sobriety. Where did it come from? Because you see, I sat in the same room with the same people and the same steps and was drunk in a skunk. And one day I sat in the same seat and I don't drink no more. Where does my sobriety come from? Contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. The 7th chapter of our book takes us into this thing that there's more controversy about than there is about when we're going to leave Cambodia. And that's working with others. One guy says do this and the other one says do that. And the drunk's sitting there waiting to see who's going to win the argument, and he can get $2 for another bottle of Musky Doo. And the book says, burn into the consciousness of every man that he too can get well, regardless of anyone. Stress the spiritual feature freely. You hear a lot of our old-timers, and God bless some of them, who say if they'd mentioned God when I came here, I'd have never stayed. And I'd just tear right after them and say, where in the hell would you have gone? Stress the spiritual feature freely. It is necessary that this man you're talking to, the book says, this book says, I haven't written mine yet, that it is necessary that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and to live by spiritual principles. And that's what I talked to him about. That's exactly what I talked to him about. There's no need of us deciding which one of us has got the worst wife. No point in it at all. As a guy down in Mississippi said, if you ain't got a wife, I'll give you mine. You got to have one. But this chapter does say something to us. It says we do not stop drinking when we place dependence on others ahead of dependence on God. What are you going to tell a drunk when he says, what do I do? Do you tell him, keep coming back, when he ain't even been there? Do you tell him, oh, you'll hear something? Or it'll rub off on you. I'm from Texas, and I'd love to tell you what rubs off on you. And it won't get you sober. It's kind of like a couple of our old cowboys had been herding cattle all day, and it was dry like it here in the desert. The wind was blowing, and their faces chapped, and their lips was chapped, and they rode up to a little watering place, and there'd been some cattle around there, and one of the cowboys jumped off and scooped his hand down through some of it and rubbed it across his lips. And the other cowboy said, my God, will that keep your lips from chapping? He said, I don't know, but it'll sure as hell keep you from licking them. That's what rubs off on you. The 8th chapter of our book, to me, has the most beautiful promise in it I have ever read in any book. This chapter to the wise that Elsa so beautifully described today. It has in it the most beautiful promise to me, an alcoholic. And I'm sure to the non-alcoholic of the Al-Anon that I have ever read anywhere. When it says we would like to leave you with this thought, that there is no situation too difficult or no unhappiness too great to be overcome. Let you and I tonight remember this. Remember the lives before we got here. Remember the man or the woman prior to the blessed gift of physical sobriety. And remember for all who are not here, no situation is too difficult. No unhappiness too great to be overcome. What a promise. What a wonderful, wonderful promise. The 9th chapter of our book talks about the family afterwards, and it seems here is where actually more problems develop than the family before AA, really. Read this chapter and see yourself as the alcoholic who has gotten sober. Most of us early in our sobriety talk only to God, not to our wives, or our kids. But it says here that our dark past in God's hands becomes our greatest possession. And a spiritual mode of living makes the road smoother as we share with one another. And as your time comes and my time comes in this program, where we're faced from time to time with pain because of our family relationships that we can almost not survive, let's remember our dark past. Time and time again, I have attempted to live the lives of my children who dared to do what I told them not to do. And I've had one or two of them just kick the guts plumb out of me. And of all things, one of my children, raised in Alateen, the life breathed into him by his Al-Anon mother, has dared to become a damn drunk. And I told him better. And he's sober, 22. But he didn't get that way listening to me. He got that way going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I survived it. He never was in any trouble of dying. I damn near made it. My pride, my ego, here, how can I go across the country and speak at the desert Roundup and dare tell them I've got a son that stays drunk most of the time? And we have to have our dark past in God's hands because, as the book says, sometimes it's our only asset. Sometimes I've got to reach down and see me as I really was to be able to live today. 10th chapter of our book is a beautiful story of an employer who became an alcoholic and then a sober employee. And we're grateful for these people. The 11th chapter of our book is an amazing thing. It tells you again what's going to happen. You would think there weren't 10 other chapters when you start to read this thing. It tells you exactly what's going to happen. But it tells us something else. It tells us in here we'll come to know the true meaning of love thy neighbor. It also tells us that in this fellowship, and this is a line that I wish was hanging on the door of every AA meeting room in America and wherever AA is. The line that says no one is too discredited or has sunk so low to be cordially welcomed here if he means business. I got an old country friend over in Tyler, Texas, who spoke here, I think, that says to me time and time again, and to Chuck, why don't, in addition to the praying hands, we put out a plaque with a crooked arm to put around the drunk that's not here? No one is too discredited or has sunk so low to be cordially welcomed here if he means business. This, to me, is our program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Only to me as I see it. The blessings and the benefit and the love of this meeting this weekend is beyond description to me. This is like the greatest compliment I can pay to the Californians. It's like being at home. Nearly all of our state's desert, and we could have a hell of a roundup. You have been so kind and so gracious to my wife and I this weekend. And we're so fortunate to have been here with you. A year or so ago, riding across the state of Arkansas, a little thing came in my mind, and as I close now, I share it with you. And where it came from, I know. I've not cranked with it. It's just as it came to my mind. And I share it here with you now. We thank thee, God, our Father, and above all, our friend, for lifting us out of the life we were in, for standing us up and letting us know that life's never over till you let us go. For this program of truth and concern for another, for the book and the fellowship and the love of our brother. Our thanks we offer, but in deep gratitude we pray for thy gift of life, ours for today. God bless you all.